Hello and welcome to News 9. I'm Varghese Abraham. First up, let's take a look at what is happening with regard to the investigations into the murder of the Karni Sena chief. Now, a special investigation team has been headed by Additional Director General Dinesh of the Rajasthan Police has been formed to probe the killing of the Rashtriya Rajput Karni Sena chief Sukhdev Singh Gogamedi. Now, the Rajasthan police also carried out searches to nab the two accused who allegedly killed Gogamedi for backing the enemies of gangster Rohit Godara. Now, Rohit Godara is said to have ties with Lawrence Bishnoi gang, who was taken responsibility for the murder in a Facebook post. Now, Gogamedi has shot dead in the living room of his house in Jaipur. Shops and businesses remain shut in several cities in Rajasthan on Wednesday in protest against the killing of the Karni Sena chief. Meanwhile, there were several organizations of Rajputs as well as other cultural organizations that approached the local administration with pleas as well as with memorandums asking them to take immediate action against the perpetrators of the crime. Now, top bureaucrats of the state, including Chief Secretary Usha Sharma and DGP Umesh Mishra, had held a meeting with all district collectors and SP to review the law and order situation in view of the murder and the protests that rocked the state. The mortal remains of Gogamedi are being taken from Metro Mass Hospital to SMS Hospital, where the post-mortem has been completed and he will be cremated today. Tensions were in fact high as this particular situation took place. The body of the slain person was moved from the hospital for post-mortem, and it is being said that the post-mortem has been completed as of now, and today the cremation of Gogamedi is expected. The mortal remains will be taken towards his hometown and the cremation will be carried out from there. Rajasthan witnessed a spate of protests yesterday, especially with regard to the law and order situation in the state. The Chief Secretary, meanwhile, has held meetings with all the SPs and collectors and have asked them to be vigilant and also asked them to heighten their alertness with regard to the protests that were happening. And many of the Rajput organizations did approach the local administration as well as the newly elected MLAs, asking them for immediate action on the ground to trace the accused. Two accused have been identified so far in the case and efforts are on to nab them. A special investigation team has been constituted to look into the matter. Well, Rohit Godara is the gangster who has in fact claimed for this particular murder. Gogamedi was murdered in cold blood in his house. It is being said that one person has been arrested. One person, beg your pardon, has been shot, and another person is said to, two people have been identified in that shootout. The CCTV cameras have captured the incident completely. Rohit Godara is said to be the person behind this particular attack, and he is associated with the Lawrence Bishnoi gang. Gogamedi was shot dead in the living room of his house in Jaipur. Shops and businesses remain shut in several cities in Rajasthan. Congress, which received a drubbing in the elections in 3 states in the Hindi heartland, might be trying to use the swearing-in of Revanth Reddy in Telangana to project a unity within the INDIA alliance. Now, the INDIA alliance had cracks in it, especially after the defeat of the Congress in 3 prominent Hindi states, with Akhilesh, Mamata Banerjee and other leaders such as Nitish Kumar taking a dig at the Congress. The Congress had immediately called for a meeting of INDIA leaders, and this had resulted in remarks coming in from some of the prominent constituents in that alliance, asking as to why the meeting was called on December 6th when it has not been called for the last 3 months, in which the Congress was in an election mode in the 3 states. Revanth Reddy has made calls to several INDIA bloc leaders, including Mamata Banerjee and MK Stalin, and has invited them to the swearing-in ceremony. While Mamata expressed her inability to attend the function due to other engagements, she is said to have deputed Trinamool Congress Rajya Sabha floor leader Derek O'Brien to fly to Hyderabad to attend the function. Stalin's attendance, meanwhile, could also be unsure due to the flood situation in Chennai and in Tamil Nadu. Invitations have also been sent to CPI General Secretary D. Raja, Jharkhand Chief Minister Hemant Soren and others, as well as to Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Y.S. Jaganmohan Reddy, is what sources are saying. Revanth also telephoned CPIM General Secretary Sitaram Yechury. While Rahul Gandhi is expected to attend the ceremony, Sonia Gandhi said she might probably fly to Hyderabad but has not confirmed her participation yet. Now, after the drubbing in the polls, the Congress is trying to call for an alliance meet, which got a cold response from the India partners. Mamata and Nitish Kumar have softened their stand after the criticism, but it will take more than a swearing ceremony to heal the cracks in the opposition alliance ahead of the elections. Well, after securing victories in Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh and Rajasthan assembly elections, the BJP remains tight-lipped about their chief ministerial picks. Despite meetings between Home Minister Amit Shah and Party President JP Nadda, central observers' names have not yet been disclosed. Talking about Rajasthan's Vasundhara Raje, who is in Delhi, and BJP spokesperson Lakshmikant Bharadwaj mentioned that decisions would now come from Delhi. Raje had a show of strength at her residence where MLAs had met her. Meanwhile, in Chhattisgarh, it witnessed a heightened security around Renuka Singh and Raman Singh's residences, leading to speculations. Also, MP Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan is seemingly unperturbed, visiting night shelters and medical colleges as the waiting game goes on in Madhya Pradesh. The party in Delhi is silent on developments after meetings with speculations ranging from the possibility of new faces to Chauhan's potential claims, given that the party's impressive MP win. Elected MLAs from the 3 states, including 12 BJP MPs, are currently in Delhi for the ongoing parliament session. The BJP is likely to introduce new faces as chief ministers in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. This is according to sources close to those developments. Despite the party's impressive performance in the recently concluded state assembly elections, the official confirmation on the chief minister's appointment is still pending. In Rajasthan, speculation surrounds Vasundhara Raje or Baba Balaknath as potential CM candidates. People in Rajasthan express a preference for Vasundhara Raje is what is being said, while there are other contenders including Gajendra Singh Shekhawat and Diya Kumari. In Madhya Pradesh, Shivraj Singh Chauhan is expected to be the prominent face for the CM position due to his welfare schemes. However, Chauhan, while acknowledging the success of initiatives like the Ladli Behna scheme, denies actively pursuing another term as chief minister. Other potential CM candidates in Madhya Pradesh include Prahlad Singh Patel, Kailash Vijayvargiya and Jyotiraditya Scindia. In Chhattisgarh, former CM Raman Singh and BJP leader Arun Sao are leading the race for the CM's post. The party's silence on official announcements adds to the ongoing suspense. Chennai grapples with the aftermath of Cyclone Michaung, facing severe flooding, waterlogging and power outages for 2 days after the storm hit. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh will be visiting Tamil Nadu today as representatives of the central government to assess the flood situation, and also will hold a meeting with Chief Minister M.K. Stalin. Despite weakening, the cyclone is expected to bring heavy rainfall to Chhattisgarh, Odisha and North Andhra Pradesh for the next 10 to 12 hours. Rescue operations continue in waterlogged areas like Belacheri and Thambaram, with people seeking help and boats ferrying residents to higher ground. Schools and colleges in Chennai are closed on December 7th as severe flooding persists. South Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu are clear from further rainfall. Chief Minister M.K. Stalin seeks an immediate interim relief fund of 5,060 crore from Prime Minister Narendra Modi to aid cyclone-affected areas.
The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
The war between Israel and Hamas has now entered its 62nd day. Let's get you the latest update from the war front. Israeli forces have surrounded the house of a top Hamas leader in its latest operations in Gaza and its environs. Israeli forces and Hamas indulge in house-to-house battles. It is thick urban battles that we are seeing between a professional army and a guerrilla force. Israeli forces are operating in the heart of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. United Nations chief has invoked Article 99 to force the Security Council to address the issue of the war in Gaza. Israel has meanwhile approved minimal fuel supply to Gaza. This is according to the statement coming in from the Israeli Prime Minister's office. There are several hospitals that have not had fuel supply for the last couple of weeks, many of them saying that they are at their lowest ends. Meanwhile, 1,207 Palestinians have been killed since the truce collapsed. This is according to Gaza's health ministry. Israeli forces and Hamas terrorists indulged in house-to-house fighting over the control of Khan Yunis on Wednesday. Khan Yunis is Gaza's second biggest city. The IDF claimed it had carried out strikes on about 250 targets in Gaza Strip during the past day, while Hamas claimed it killed 10 Israeli soldiers in Khan Yunis and injured several of them, a claim that couldn't be verified. The United Nations reported a significant increase of Israeli bombardments of Gaza since Monday afternoon, accompanied by intense ground fighting and an increase in Hamas rocket attacks targeting Israel. Amid the escalating conflict on Wednesday, United Nations Security General Antonio Guterres invoked a rarely used clause in the UN Charter to raise the issue on his own. Israeli bombardments of Gaza has been happening since Monday afternoon, accompanied by intense ground fighting and an increased Hamas rocket attacks that are targeting the whole of Israel. Meanwhile, the United Nations might go ahead and discuss about the war in Gaza as Israel intensifies its efforts to flush out Hamas terrorists from Gaza. Meanwhile, the United Nations has said that they are facing one of the intense humanitarian disasters that are taking place in the region. He wrote in a letter to the Council that the situation is fast deteriorating. This is according to Guterres, and a catastrophe with potentially irreversible implications for Palestinians as a whole and for peace and security in the region is taking place. This is according to a letter addressed to the United Nations by Guterres. Hundreds and thousands of Gazans have continued to flee to the west and south of Khan Yunis, including to Rafah. However, as per the United Nations shelters in these areas were beyond capacity, forcing the displaced Palestinians to sleep in the streets or in empty lots. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar told a rally in Gaza last year that Hamas would deploy fighters and rockets in a fierce strike on Israel, the nation that imprisoned him for 23 years. On October 7, the deadly Hamas attack on Israel showed his threat was real and not a mere talk.
Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar's speech in Gaza last year was no idle threat.
We will come to you with an endless number of rockets. We will come to you in a flood of soldiers without limit.
It sounded like crowd-pleasing hyperbole. But at this time, a secret plan had already been hatched for an assault on Israel, a country that jailed Sinwar for 23 years before he was freed and rose to the Hamas leadership. October 7 would be the deadliest day in Israel's history, in which the militants killed 1,200 people and took 240 hostages, Israeli tallies say. Israel has retaliated with bombardment and a ground invasion, killing at least 15,000 Palestinians. Sinwar spent half his adult life behind bars in Israel. He was jailed in 1988 for planning the abduction and killing of 2 Israeli soldiers and the murder of 4 Palestinian collaborators. This was the moment he was freed in 2011, one of more than 1,000 Palestinians released for a single Israeli soldier.
This is one of the biggest strategic events in the history of our people's cause in the past years. So we are living a moment of unusual joy.
Sinwar has been leading negotiations for prisoner swaps with hostages, sources say, and it's a personal issue. He has vowed to free all Palestinian prisoners Israel holds. Sinwar is a ruthless man, according to Michael Kubi, a former official for Israel's Shin Bet intelligence agency, who interrogated him for 180 hours in jail. The now 61-year-old militant leader was then in his late 20s, Kubi says, but dedicated to attacking Israel.
Yahya Sinwar was at the prison. He was the chief of the whole Hamas prisoners. They were sitting together. They make discussion inside the prison, of course, and they taught how to fight the Israelis, after they will be released. That was his plan.
Born in the Khan Yunis refugee camp, Sinwar rose to prominence as a hardline enforcer. Before jail, he was head of the Al-Majd security apparatus which tracked, killed and punished Palestinians accused of collaborating with Israel. Sources who know him, whether Hamas or Israeli, agree his devotion to the militant movement is extraordinary.
So he told me, the Hamas is my wife, the Hamas is my child, the Hamas for me is everything.
Sinwar is one of Israel's most wanted. This was Israeli Army Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi in October.
The one who decided on this despicable attack was Yahya al-Sinwar, the sovereign of the Gaza Strip. Therefore, he and the whole system under him are as good as dead.
Regional officials say Israel is unlikely to end the war until Sinwar is dead or captured. 2 military experts said that would be an important symbolic victory. But achieving it would be long and costly for Israel, with no guarantee of success. Sinwar Mohammed Daif, the mastermind of last month's assault, and a third commander, direct military operations, possibly from bunkers beneath Gaza, Hamas sources have told Reuters. Some tunnels are believed to be 80 meters underground, and Kubi says Sinwar wouldn't give up.
Even he will fight. I'm sure that Yahya Sinwar wouldn't leave the Gaza Strip.
Israeli army released a video on Wednesday showing various rockets, grenades, drones and explosive devices in a cache of weapons the army said was found near a school complex in northern Gaza. The army said it had uncovered one of the largest weapon depots in Gaza with hundreds of rocket-propelled grenades, dozens of anti-tank missiles, long-range missiles, explosive devices and unmanned aerial vehicles. Now, the Israeli army found the weapon cache in a residential area near a complex of schools. Now, the army said some of the seized weapons were destroyed on site and others were sent for further investigation. These are the visuals of the seized weapons from that area, which included long-range rockets that were created by the Hamas terrorists. And we have the weapons on display. This is from a video that was shared by the IDF, which they claim are weapons that were captured from a depot that was hid away in a school. The ammunition consists of anti-tank missiles, launchers, missiles that were created by the Hamas to strike at Israel, as well as several Kalashnikovs, anti-tank mines, as well as grenades.
צק"ג 50 מצא אמצעי לחימה רבים במרחב שאנו נמצאים בו כרגע. בתוך אמצעי הלחימה אפשר לראות טילי נ"ט רבים, מאות, וכן אמצעים נוספים אסטרטגיים, דוגמת כלי טיס בלתי מאוישים וטילים ארוכי טווח. אנחנו נמצאים בלב שכונת מגורים. אפשר לראות לידי גם את מרחב בתי הספר, קריית בתי ספר מאוד מאוד גדולה.
The Israeli army released a video on Wednesday showing that it claims airstrikes on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Since this morning, IDF tanks and artillery have been striking several locations in Lebanon, and IDF aircraft struck a military command center and military infrastructure belonging to the Hezbollah terrorist organization, is what the release from the Israeli army has said. Israel and heavily armed Lebanese group Hezbollah have been exchanging fire across the Lebanese-Israeli border since the start of the war on October 7th. Tensions have been building on Israel's northern border, especially with Lebanon, as there have been skirmishes between Israel's army as well as the Hezbollah militants on the other side of the Lebanese border. There have been also significant exchanges at the time when the operations in Gaza were on itself. Many of the Lebanese citizens, especially who are residing in the southern border of Lebanon, have moved northwards, while Israel has fortified its northern presence. Israel has warned Hezbollah not to enter the war and has in fact said that it will not stop it from going ahead and carrying the operations in Lebanese territory as well. These are visuals coming in of the bombardment of Hezbollah targets inside Lebanon that was shared by Israel. Well, former President Trump directed his son Eric Trump not to testify against in the ongoing New York fraud trial that poses threat to the family's business empire. Trump stated on Truth Social that Eric's prior testimony was perfect and saw no point in further wasting time in what he labeled as a crooked court. Eric had distanced himself from the crucial financial statements during an early testimony, emphasizing that he had no involvement with the statement of financial condition. Now, Eric Trump is also defendant in the case brought in by State Attorney General Letitia James. He has already testified alongside brother Donald Jr. and sister Ivanka in the case. President Joe Biden hinted that he might not have pursued a 2024 re-election campaign if not for Donald Trump's candidacy, as he believes Trump presents a distinct threat to the United States. Biden underscored the importance of preventing Trump from winning.
President Joe Biden said Tuesday that he might not have run for re-election if Donald Trump had not entered the race. At a fundraising campaign stop outside Boston, Biden said, quote, "If Trump wasn't running, I'm not sure I'd be running," adding, quote, "We cannot let him win." Reporters later asked Biden whether he would be running if Trump were not.
I expect so, but look, he is running, and I have to run.
Biden's comments come as even staunch Democratic voters have expressed concern in recent polls about the president's age. At 81 years old, Biden is the oldest president in U.S. history. Trump responded to Biden's remarks at a Fox News town hall held the same day, saying, quote, "Somebody gave him a talking point they thought would sound good." Trump and Biden last faced off for the Oval Office in 2020, after Trump served one term as president from 2017 to 2021. Biden's aides increasingly regard Trump's frontrunner status for the Republican presidential nomination as insurmountable, according to two of those Democrats who declined to be named. Recent polling has shown Trump leading Biden in hypothetical matchups in key swing states and on the national level.
Senator Ron Wyden cautioned that unnamed governments are monitoring smartphone users through app push notifications. Wyden's letter to the Department of Justice highlighted foreign officials demanding for data from Google and Apple, revealing a concerning avenue for governments to track smartphones. Push notifications, commonly used by various apps to alert users about messages or updates, often go through Google and Apple servers, a fact many users are unaware of. Apps of all kinds rely on push notifications to alert smartphone users to incoming messages, breaking news and other updates. These are the audible dings or visual indicators used to get when they receive an email or their sports team wins a game. What users often do not realize is that almost all such notifications travel over Google and Apple servers. Wyden called on the Justice Department to repeal or modify any policies that impede this transparency. Now, families of COVID-19 victims gathered as former Prime Minister Boris Johnson appeared at the pandemic inquiry. Johnson, who served from 2019 to 2022, resigned amid scandals for attending lockdown gatherings. He faces emotional inquiry sessions exploring Britain's high pandemic death toll. Let's hear some of the reactions.
If he says today that he got the big things right, I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to sit there. How is 230,000 deaths not a big thing? Over the last 7 weeks, we have heard so much that is depressing, distressing, completely incredulous. And today I'm just dreading hearing that the older and vulnerable in our society were collateral damage. There must be accountability, not weak apologies. It can't happen again.
I just want answers. I want to know why this has happened, why he didn't learn from the mistakes of the first wave, why he didn't lock down sooner, and why my mum died when she didn't need to.
I'm going to be without my parents this Christmas, and if we don't learn lessons, there's going to be other families in the future who will suffer from government ineptitude.
And the way he thinks he'll be remembered in history is very different to the way that I'll remember him in history. I think that he's been responsible for the highest death toll that this country's seen since the Second World War, and that he needs to stand up and take some responsibility and accountability for what he's done, rather than lying through his teeth. I mean, he hasn't even had the decency to come and see us today. He snuck in first thing this morning because he didn't want to face bereaved families, and I think that says all you can say about Boris Johnson.
He'll be remembered as a Prime Minister who presided over one of the greatest peacetime tragedies of all times in the world. And I mean, he's a disgraced Prime Minister, ex-Prime Minister, so I think his legacy speaks for itself.
Margarito Flores and his brother were once involved in running a multi-billion-dollar narcotics distribution network in Chicago area alongside notorious Mexican drug kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Now collaborates with an Illinois-based firm specializing in training narcotics investigator agents and police officers across the United States. Take a look.
I come from a family of drug traffickers.
This is Margarito Flores. He used to work with one of the world's most notorious drug kingpins, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Reuters has agreed not to show Flores' face out of a concern for his safety.
By the time I was 17, I guess I graduated by then, right? I had a degree in drug trafficking.
Flores went from counting packages of drugs as a child to running a multi-billion-dollar network with his twin brother in the Chicago area in the early 2000s, to eventual informant who turned on El Chapo. Now he's pulling back the curtain on his former trade secrets for law enforcement.
We're going to be going around the country and hopefully around the world and being able to share some of these tactics. That's where you see money and drugs.
Flores works with an Illinois-based firm called Dynamic Police Training. At this session near Chicago, over 100 law enforcement personnel are learning about the flow of bulk U.S. currency that finances trafficking.
So I'm talking about bulk U.S. currency that needs to be moved in semi-trucks. That is what fuels drug cartels.
Between 2005 and 2008, the Flores brothers' distribution cell earned nearly $2 billion, receiving more than 3,300 pounds of cocaine a month from the Beltran Leyva and El Chapo's Sinaloa cartels. That's according to federal court documents and the U.S. Department of Justice. Arrested in 2008, the brothers were sentenced to 14 years in prison. For their cooperation, they served 5. Prosecutors credit them with providing unparalleled assistance for the government's case against El Chapo. As informants, the Flores brothers pressed record on an audio tape device and called him to discuss a heroin shipment.
The phone call, for sure, we knew that it was gonna, change our lives, because the government had let us know that there has never been a legally recorded or intercepted call with Chapo Guzman talking about a drug transaction in the United States. What do they want to do?
The brothers were released in 2020.
Get rid of it.
Flores' law enforcement trainees told Reuters his insight helps them figure out the best way to dismantle narcotics networks.
I don't know if there's anyone out there that could, sit here today and, understand the American drug trade, the Mexican drug trade, as I have. I live both sides of it from every aspect.
Russian President Vladimir Putin arrived on Wednesday in Abu Dhabi, the first leg of his blitz in the Gulf tour. The host nation staged lavish welcome ceremony with jets flying over the city, leaving contrails in colors of the Russian flag. Camel and horse cavalry guards lined the route of Putin's motorcade with the airport to the presidential palace. Now, the Russian President Vladimir Putin highlighted the exceptional state of relations between Russia and the United Arab Emirates during a meeting with UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Both countries collaborated within the OPEC Plus and engaged in significant oil and gas ventures. Putin mentioned televised discussions would include topics like the situation in Ukraine and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The visit marked a rare foreign trip for Putin since the International Criminal Court of Justice had issued a warrant for his arrest for allegedly war crimes committed in Ukraine. After over 21 months of Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine, intense battles persist without a clear resolution as neither faction has decisively impacted the battlefield. Ukrainians hoped 2023 would be the year of the country that drove Russian forces out of swaths of occupied land, but the front line has barely budged. Listen in.
More than 21 months into the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II, fierce fighting rages in Ukraine with no end in sight. Ukrainians hoped 2023 would be the year the country drove Russian forces out of swathes of occupied land. But the front line has barely budged. Reuters Ukraine chief correspondent Thomas Barmforth.
The main takeaway of the year is probably that there haven't been a great deal of advances by either side during the war.
The war in Ukraine has already killed or wounded hundreds of thousands of people. destroyed cities and villages, forced millions from their homes, and placed hundreds of thousands more under the Russian occupation. Kiev's much anticipated counter-offensive has so far proved unable to punch through Russian defensive lines in the south and east.
Russia controls about 17.5% of Ukrainian territory. Russian forces are back on the offensive in the east, and they've been mounting pressure on the town of Avdiivka. Many of the Ukrainian soldiers are exhausted, and many of them have been fighting out at the front for almost 2 years. Ukraine's own commander-in-chief has already described the war as at a stalemate. President Zelensky has rejected that characterization, but it really does look very hard to imagine that either side could quickly forge a breakthrough and change things very quickly on the battlefield.
Ukrainians know they must secure Western military aid to carry on, and that it will be harder with the war in Gaza distracting global attention.
It's clear that there is increasing fatigue in the West on the matter of providing military and other support to Ukraine. The White House has asked Congress to approve a roughly $60 billion assistance program for Ukraine that would come through next year. At the moment, it hasn't passed.
Meanwhile, in Europe, a 4-year, €20 billion EU military aid proposal has also run into resistance from some bloc members. Some Ukrainians believe Russian leader Vladimir Putin will use any let-up in fighting to build further defences and regenerate the Russian army for a new assault.
Russia is expected to hold an election in March that is widely expected to hand Vladimir Putin another 6 years in the Kremlin. Some observers think that he may feel his hands are more untied after that election to escalate his war effort. That could include, for instance, mobilizing more Russian men to fight in the army. He may also decide to invest even more effort into the defense industry in Russia.
The strain of the war is likely to weigh on everyday Ukrainians, for many of whom war fatigue has become a fact of life.
I spoke to an internally displaced person from Kherson. His name is Oleksiy. He fled his hometown of Kherson in April 2022 when it was still under occupation. He's now currently living in Kiev, and he has no plan to go back home to Kherson because he fears that it's still getting pounded by artillery, and he thinks that it's too dangerous. I think there's a lot of frustration, a lot of fatigue, and also a sense that it's going to be a long time until anything goes back to anything resembling normal. Currently, if everything stays as it is, doesn't look like Russian forces have any appetite for peace talks. The Ukrainians themselves, their official position is that they want all of their country back, every single inch of occupied territory to be returned to Ukraine, and their position is that peace talks cannot take place until Russia has left their territory. So it really does seem that neither side is ready for peace talks, and therefore it seems unlikely that the war is going to end anytime soon.
Well, Iran sent up a rocket with a test-living space capsule on Wednesday. The semi-official Tasnim news agency reported as the country pressed on with plans to send astronauts to space. The announcement came 10 years after Iran announced it had sent 2 live monkeys into space and brought them back safely. Iran has sent up a rocket into space, but this time a living capsule, as it calls it. Iran's capsule reached an altitude of 130 kilometers. These are parts of Iran's efforts to send astronauts to space. Iran has been pursuing an active space program and has been exploring the rocket technology and also ability to put satellites into space. Saudi Arabia has urged the United States to ensure that they would make sure that we will in fact try to get back to that particular aspect of the story. What we understand is that Saudi Arabia has in fact asked its authorities to ask the United States to exercise restraint in responding Houthi attacks on ships in the Red Sea. Riyadh is concerned about the spillover from the Hamas-Israel conflict, as the Iran-aligned Houthis have joined the regional turmoil by targeting The Houthis claim their actions support the Palestinians and vow to continue until Israel ceases its offensive on the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, one of the aspects of the story is that the Forest City was an ambitious residential project in Malaysia, but it has failed to draw residents. Buyers are shying away from the development because the Chinese developer Country Garden is behind it. Take a look at this report.
Is this a green futuristic metropolis or a ghost town literally built on sand? Forest City is located in Johor, a state in southern Malaysia, but so far it's a city without people. The huge $100 billion residential project was built entirely on an artificial island, just a stone's throw away from the expensive real estate market of neighboring Singapore. It aims to house 700,000 people by 2035.
There's a 3 cluster in here. Totally there's 4 cluster. Okay, 3 cluster in here, and there are main cluster in the other side. Okay.
This Malaysian pensioner, who wants to be referred to as Mr. Lim, is one of its few residents. He bought 2 units from Chinese investors. After the public learned that the private Chinese developer behind Forest City, Country Garden, had run into financial difficulties, many first-time buyers wanted to sell. So far, the majority of the 28,000 apartments that have been completed in Forest City have been sold, but hardly any of the owners have moved in. Mr. Lim is confident that this will change with the expansion of the city.
It's 60% owned by the Country Garden, 40% actually, that owned by the Johor. That the local government, correct, including the Sultan. It's not totally owned by Country Garden. So in that sense, that they feel that this one is still quite have potential. So that's why they still keep well maintained. But the key was well maintained.
Wherever you go in Forest City, you will come across dozens of gardeners. But most apartments are empty and seem to be nothing more than an investment for buyers. To lure more residents to the island, an entire area has been declared a duty-free zone. But experts say this is not enough. Forest City needs to attract people who want to live there.
When there's no people moving, there's no demand for facility, amenity, no commercial unit or no shopping mall, no retail will move into the city, then the city is incomplete without people.
A look at night reveals the problem. To stimulate more economic activity, the Malaysian government announced a plan to create a special financial zone in Forest City. This tower is reserved exclusively for companies, generating jobs that the local population can theoretically profit from.
Well, of course, it's good for Malaysia because it attracts investment from other countries like Singapore, China, and other Asian countries.
It would be a shame if the place has to close down. I come here with the children, and it's nice to play here.
The real threat to the inhabitants of Forest City is not in the sea. Country Garden is currently among the world's most indebted developers. So far, only 15% of their dream has been realized. Much more investment is needed to keep it alive.
Bangladesh's most important export sector in the textile industry, but workers say they are paid far too little and are taking to the streets in protest. The country's minimum wage commission announced an increase to about $110 a month on November 7th, but the workers and the union leaders are demanding about $208.
Angry garment workers have been protesting on the streets of Dhaka, Bangladesh, for the last couple of weeks. They are fighting for higher wages and feel let down by politicians. We've come to the streets so that the government solves the crisis and helps us survive. Taslima took part in the protests because she's worried about the nutrition and education of her children, as she can't match the living costs with her income. The price of everything has risen. We can't manage. The house rent has been increased. We're suffering. That's why we're demanding a minimum monthly wage of 23,000 takas. That's $210 US. More than 4 million people, mostly women, work in Bangladesh's ready-made garment industry, the country's main export sector. The minimum monthly wage garment workers earn is the lowest in the world. Because of inflation and skyrocketing costs of everyday goods, workers are struggling to make ends meet. Their wages barely cover living expenses for half a month. Bangladesh's garment factories generate nearly 85% of the country's exports, amounting to $55 billion annually. But factory owners say they can't do more.
COVID-19, the war in Ukraine and now in Gaza, these three factors have pushed the whole world into a recession. We see sales are down, so orders here are low too. So we formed a wage board and fixed the minimum monthly wage at about $115. A salary increase of 56% is no joke.
In this conflict, the workers don't receive any support from the government. Taslima does not understand why the state is taking action against workers like herself. She believes her demands are justified. We're only demanding better wages. We're not committing any crimes. We're not thieving or robbing. So why do they torture us? Unrest in the garment industry means unrest in the country's overall economy. It's unclear how the conflict will end, especially for the workers.
Held in the major oil producer, the United Arab Emirates, the key question at this year's UN climate talks COP28 is whether the final agreement will include a decision to phase down oil and gas. Take a look.
The issue at the heart of COP28 in Dubai is whether it will be the first UN climate conference to produce a global agreement to phase out fossil fuels. They're the biggest cause of climate change, and fossil fuels still produce around 80% of the world's energy. Here's a look at who's pushing for a deal. Norway, the US, Canada, Chile, Colombia, and some African nations, including Kenya and Ethiopia, are among the 80 countries seeking a deal. The European Union is also on board. Here's Climate Commissioner Wopke Hoekstra.
I want this COP to mark the beginning of the end for fossil fuels. This is a key part for the EU and for all of our negotiating mandates, meaning that all 27 European member states want this to be part of the negotiated outcome.
Opposition to a fossil fuel phase-out is led by Russia, Saudi Arabia, and China, diplomats said. Representatives of some African nations have said they could support a phase-out deal if wealthy countries agree to quit first. Uganda's energy minister said a deal could be acceptable if it allowed developing nations to exploit their resources in the near term. Asking the country to stop using fossil fuels, she said, was like asking Uganda to stay in poverty. Diplomats and observers told Reuters that some countries, like Saudi Arabia and China, have consistently raised the issue of equity at the talks, emphasizing the high historical contribution of wealthy nations to climate change. But some said they doubted whether these nations would support a deal even if the equity issue was addressed. Another sticking point is whether the deal should allow for continued consumption if emissions are captured or abated. Diplomats say Saudi Arabia, a top oil producer, wants this kind of deal. But the tech is expensive and not used at scale. The UN's Climate Science Panel says it sees a limited role for carbon capture to zero out the world's emissions by 2050. The US and EU support a COP28 deal that recognizes these technologies with limits. Irish Climate Minister Eamon Ryan says it can help in some sectors.
There will be a small amount abated in hard-to-reach sectors, cement, steel, other areas, but that can't be a get-out-of-jail card for international fossil fuel companies, cover for kind of technological wish that, we're going to invent this new technology to eat up all the carbon.
The UN's Climate Science Panel says steep fossil fuel cuts are needed to avert more severe climate change.
Well, that's all in this edition of the Bulletin. Stay tuned to News 9 for further updates.